So it's already been 2 weeks since Netflix dropped their Avatar live action series, and whether you love it or hate it, it is a huge success. It's currently getting more numbers than One Piece and Yu Yu Hakusho, and yes, those series had more positive reviews, but that does not change the fact that this series is gonna get renewed, but not just for season 2, but also season 3. There was a tweet about this the other day, and then we had a cast reaction. Daniel Dae Kim came out and was kind of trolling the cast. It's a really funny video. I'll put it down below in the description for you to check out. We're gonna be able to get a complete adaptation, and I know this series is a mixed bag. I myself have some problems, but overall enjoyed the show, and I think from here on out what can happen is the creators of this show can get feedback from the fans to make a better season 2 and 3. Plus, those seasons in the original series were better anyways. They'll be easier to adapt. So in this video we're going to be going over how the season will probably be structured. We're going to go over some of the issues book 1 had that they can fix in book 2 and 3, and lastly I'm going to go over my review of the season itself. I'm a little late to this video, I apologize, but we're gonna get right into it. So if we look at the end of book 1, Azula right here was taking over Omashu. Fire Lord Ozai finally let her into the world, but it wasn't to capture Zuko and Iroh like she did in the original series. And Ozai didn't even seem that angry at his son in this version. He just said that Zuko will survive if he's strong enough. So we're not gonna be seeing Zuko and Iroh on the run initially. We're probably gonna see Azula manipulate the situation to make Zuko look like the bad guy. For example, in the original series, in the chase episode, there was the brief moment where everyone teamed up to take on Azula, and I'm thinking we might have a similar scene like this, and Azula will try to paint the picture, oh father, Zuko's betrayed you, he's teamed up with the Avatar, and then all the Fire Nation soldiers will go after him. Or maybe Azula herself will just go after him. Maybe the whole season it's gonna be her trying to one-up her brother and try to capture the Avatar first, which is obviously part of it, but that's what I'm thinking. It's a little confusing, but I think episode 1 of season 2, it's gonna be the Return to Omashu episode. We're not doing Avatar State. General Fong might be in the picture, but I don't think we're doing a full adaptation of that episode. But since Bumi's character was changed so much in this previous season, I don't know if they want him to still kind of just wait and listen for the right opportunity to take his city back. That's what I'm a little concerned about, because if they have him go down that route, it's gonna look like he's giving up. So they may have him go the Earth King route where he travels the world or something. Maybe he collects the White Lotus and then they come back at the right time, or he really is trapped like he was in the original series and does wait for the eclipse. Regardless of what they do with Bumi, it's gonna be a little different, and I'm pretty sure of that. And yes, Aang probably will learn waterbending off screen. He's probably gonna learn a little bit on screen, but there's gonna be a time jump, and when we get to that time jump, he'll probably know most of the basics, where we're obviously going to Omashu to learn earthbending, and then obviously later on save the city. But episode 2 is probably when we're gonna meet Toph, and I think what they're gonna be doing for episode 2 is they're gonna merge the Blind Bandit and the Chase episode. I think this would make the most sense. You could still have the Boulder, you could still have her face off against him, but I don't think doing the whole arena thing and then they think Toph and Aang stole the money and all that stuff, I don't think that's gonna happen. I think Azula is gonna be pursuing them directly, and Toph is gonna see Azula for the first time right away, and they're gonna fly off on Appa, and we're gonna get some of the events of the Chase episode, and we're gonna have everyone team up against Azula, just how it did happen in the original. But episode 3, I feel like what they could do is have Bitter Work and Zuko alone merged there. Aang and Toph will train, Iroh will train Zuko with redirection, and we'll probably have a moment where when Zuko leaves Iroh briefly to get lightning himself, maybe there's a brief moment there where there will be flashbacks of Zuko alone. They could do Zuko alone earlier, and maybe the Bitter Work episode happens later, but I feel like it makes the most sense to merge the episodes this way. I also doubt we're getting the library episode. It seems they showed Wang Shitong in book 1 in the spirit world just to avoid having to do the library. They wanted to get him in the show, and the fact that Sokka and Katara couldn't hear him proves that they're probably not going to go there. So they might go to the desert, they probably won't. There's going to be some moment though where I believe Appa will be stolen, and they're probably going to do it with maybe the rough rhinos instead, or somebody else. Someone's going to steal him. Since Appa and Momo weren't major focuses in the first season, and it takes a lot of VFX to show them, I think it's pretty easy to take them off screen so you can have this arc. And I think during this time we're also going to see Aang reconnect with Roku, and it's going to kind of set up the back half of the season. Since they're not going to the library, he's probably going to get a vision of Appa being trapped in Ba Sing Se, and that has to be their mission to go to Ba Sing Se. Also, we could have Roku tell Aang about the eclipse, which would allow them to give the information to the Earth King. They could skip the whole library, and that's what I think is probably going to happen, but they're still going to avoid the comet. I think the beginning of book 3, like episode 1, he's going to be like, okay Aang, the comet's coming, now you have to prepare. And that's probably what's going to happen, just to make sure, even though I do believe that they're probably going to film seasons 2 and 3 back to back, just to be safe, they're going to hold it off till book 3. And I think episodes 5 to 8 will mostly be the same. Them going to Ba Sing Se. Obviously, we have Serpent's Pass, we have the drill, them getting into Ba Sing Se, Azula eventually takes it over. Pretty much everything is the same here. And if there's other things you can think of that they'll probably change or maybe add, or there's things you're looking forward to, let me know down below. But that is the structure of season 2 in my eyes. But we're going to discuss the strengths and weaknesses the show had. Now, for example, one of its greatest strengths in my opinion is what was advertised, and that was the remixing of storylines. Now, some of you may disagree with this, but I think episode 3 is proof that they did a great job. You had the Mechanist storyline, you had Jet, and they connected so seamlessly. Now, I know there was moments of the episode you kind of were taken out. It was a little boring. I've heard that criticism. I've also heard people say that Sokka didn't get his moment with Jet, and I don't disagree with this, but I think this is another great take to show how far Jet is willing to go. He wants to rid the world of the Fire Nation, and he wants to rid the world of people who associate with the Fire Nation. And if it means he's got to hurt innocent Earth Kingdom civilians to do this, then he's willing to do whatever it takes. And I really like that. You may not be a big fan of it, but I like the story here. Next up, I also really like the expanded lore in the Avatar verse. Zuko's journal about the past avatars, making the world feel bigger because we didn't know about them as much in the original series at the beginning. And it was also nice seeing Aang meet with them. And my favorite expansion of the show was the first 15 minutes, seeing the Air Nomad genocide, because we never got to see it in the original, and obviously that was for the best. I think that was great for the story. You can kind of put the pieces together, but since this is a different take, it's good to see the events happening, like how the Firebenders got up to the temple, and how every single Air Nomad was at the Southern Air Temple because of the Comet Festival. It's a great detail. I think they handled most of the Fire Nation characters amazingly. Zuko was literally ripped right out of the cartoon. It felt like he was the same Zuko. He even felt like Dante Bosco's portrayal of Zuko in certain scenes. And obviously in this version, he seemed more desperate than angry, and he almost did have too many redeeming qualities. He didn't really have a chance to feel like a villain, but these are slight changes that don't ruin the story that much, and it sets him up for his redemption arc way later. Another great Fire Nation character was Iroh. He was nearly perfect. He was a little different than the original, not nearly as carefree. He did obviously have his moments like in episode 2 and a few others, but his dynamic with Zuko was top tier. And in episode 4, he had amazing scenes like with Zuko, also with that Earth Kingdom soldier, the flashback with Lu Ten. It was great. Now, the episode itself wasn't great, but those scenes were great, and I just have to give applause for that. Now, while we're on the topic of Zuko and Iroh, we gotta focus on episode 6, specifically called Masks. This is my favorite episode since it adapted the Storm and the Blue Spirit episode. There's a lot of scenes that were one-to-one to the original. It worked great, and how we got here was actually quite different than in the original series. Zhao isn't well known. He's just a commander, and over time, he's able to get power, and he goes mad with it. It felt like an actual character being developed, and you always knew he'd betray Zuko, which he secretly does from the start, but when he finally has enough power, he fully takes the mask off, so it was a very entertaining episode. Now let's discuss Fire Lord Ozai, because I really enjoyed the changes they made to his character. At first I wasn't a big fan, and I just wanted evil Ozai, who doesn't care about his son, but I think they've made great changes to him, and it's kind of similar to what they did with Zhao. They're adding more depth to his character, and I know he'll ultimately not care about his kids, but burning Zuko and banishing him here was more of a punishment and a lesson to become strong than just trying to get rid of Zuko. Also, Ozai using Zuko as a way to motivate Azula was great, but Azula as a character, I do have some complaints, and we're going to get into the weaknesses of the show now. I think Azula's intro in the show was fantastic, her helping Zhao was fantastic, but I think they had a problem with how she was handled way later. She seems way more angry like Zuko, she doesn't seem as manipulative, she doesn't directly follow her father without question, which is an interesting change, and I think they probably wanted to add more of the psychological issues earlier on to have it build up rather than it come out of nowhere at the end, but it's still hard to see Azula as intimidating. And I think the actor Elizabeth Yu did a fantastic job with the scenes she had. It wasn't acting, it was more the writing and how they handled it. And I think they can fix her character in books 2 and 3. But while we're on the topic of Azula, we have to discuss her friends Mai and Ty Lee. Now I feel like the castings here are 10 out of 10, but they had zero purpose to be here. I wish they saved them for book 2 when Azula was in Omashu and she's got to pick them up, because here it feels like the girls are just her servants and they're not really her friends. They don't have their own goals or activities. Ty Lee should be at the circus. She chose to be there. I just don't think there was a point. They had a few lines of dialogue and that was really the end of it. The story literally wouldn't change without them being here. So that's just a critique there, but it's more minor. It doesn't really affect much. Now I want to bring up my least favorite change in the entire show, and this was episode 5 as a whole. Obviously that episode did great with June, but that's one positive, and I love how they remixed storylines as I went over above, but episode 5 overdid it in my opinion. There was just way too much going on. As I said earlier, we're not getting the library probably since Wang Shitong showed up, and I know they wanted to squeeze him in, but the fact that we have him, elements from the swamp episode in the spirit world, the fact that we have Ko the face stealer and Heibai, and Ko kind of disrupts the Heibai storyline, so we don't really get to experience that in full. It's just a little too much for the viewer, and I think what made Ko even creepier was the fact that he could be a villain, and the fact that he could take Aang's face, but he also helped Aang in the original, whereas this, he was just a straight up villain who took his friends, and once again, it takes away from the conflict of Heibai. So I did not like that episode, but the rest of them were pretty solid. And as I mentioned earlier, I wasn't a huge fan of episode 4, but it was mainly because of King Bumi. The changes that they made with him, I really didn't like, and I get why they did it. The world is dark, it's depressing, 100 years of war. Bumi is a little bitter that his friend left for so long, but at the same time, you would think Bumi would be happy to see his friend after 100 years. He thought he died, he would never come back, and the fact that he is, it should be a miracle. And whether the world is saved or not, just the fact that he's back is amazing. So that's why I'm not super happy with the changes. Also the fact that everyone's getting angry at Aang for leaving the world, when in reality, Aang just went to take a breather. He didn't try to run away, he got caught in a storm. And in the original, when he actually did run away, they did a really good job at explaining some people being angry at Aang for running away, but not everyone in the world was, because Aang is only 12 years old. You can't really be so hard on a kid. So I wish they didn't go a little headstrong with that. Even his own past lives were a little rough with him on that, and I was not a big fan of that. But I will say redeeming qualities was at the end of the episode where King Bumi and Aang went down the delivery system, and that's a hint at fixing his character. And this is the very last negative I have, and it has to do with how the fight between Katara and Pakku was handled. I know they didn't want to go as deep into the Northern Water Tribe being sexist storyline, which is fine, but in the end, you don't look at Pakku as negatively in this version. And the fight is 1-to-1, which looks nice, but it's just visually appealing. It doesn't have meaning, which makes it kind of feel forced. They have to do this to get to the next scene. They're obligated to do it. So hopefully they can fix the storylines moving forward, have it feel a little more natural. That's really all the things I dislike and things that I really like. Everything else was just consistently good. I loved Gordon Cormier as Aang. He has the spirit. I think Gao and Dio did great as Katara. I think the criticisms people have for her is more writing issues rather than acting. They're mistaking it for acting. And Ian Owsley as Sokka was on the level of Dallas Liu, top tier casting, and him and Suki's story wasn't nearly as good as in the original, but it was still pretty good. And each day I bounce between a 6.5 and a 7 out of 10, but I've been feeling more positive about it lately, so I'm going to settle on a 7 out of 10. This is not a perfect adaptation, but it can 100% get better with time, and I'm looking forward to seeing what changes season 2 makes. But what did you guys think of this series? Let me know down below, and subscribe for more Avatar videos. I've got a ton of them.